Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you everyone for being here. Yeah, sorry about any of the confusion with the registration. We definitely had some challenges around that, but we're glad to be here and happy to have all of you here with us as we continue to talk about the Hives program and about program management and developing community partnerships. So we are going to jump right into it. We are really open to some participation from all of you today. So if you have things you want to add as we're having discussions about developing community partners, please feel free to share your experiences so that we can all learn from each other. Couple of disclosures before we get started. We don't have any financial relationships with any of the products that we're not going to be talking about any products today. We are supported from a USDA SARE grant. However, that is helping us to be able to provide this education. And all of the resources that we're providing in this presentation are not all inclusive of what's available and do not signify an endorsement or an approval of any particular education, training, company, or organization. And the information from this presentation and from any information that we provide is that of it is just information that we are providing, and we are not responsible for any content of offsite web pages that you may be directed to take a look at. So I will be presenting with Dr. Adam Angreo. I am Valerie Carter. I am a recreation therapist at the Manchester VA in New Hampshire, and I've been facilitating the Hives program there since 2019. Yesterday I checked on our beehives and they are doing well. Our bees survived so far through the winter. It's still a little kind of winter up here. We still have a little bit of snow on the ground, but it's mostly melted. We're in early spring. And I'll let Adam introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Adam Angreo. I'm the Heroes to Hives National Director and an outreach specialist at Michigan Food and Farming Systems, where I support veterans engaging in all areas of agriculture. I'm glad to be here today.
Excellent. Thank you. So today we are going to talk about connecting and building community connections to have a really strong and thriving Hives program, and how do you make those connections. We're also going to talk about adaptations for mental health needs of veterans, and then how to continue to work with those community organizations to have hands-on beekeeping available if it's not something that you can do at your site. So for any of you who were not here for our webinar 1, that was in February, it will be available for anyone who's a VA staff on TMS. It may be available on VHA Train. I'm not sure. We'll have to get Cheryl to let us know if that will be available. In the next couple of weeks, it was 45 days from when it was presented. So in about 2 weeks, it will be available for you to review on TMS and to take that if you were not able to attend. We want to just do a quick recap. So we talked about the history of beekeeping with veterans. We talked about what's involved in a beekeeping program. So what it takes to be a beekeeper, what it takes to keep bees alive, having that knowledge base, and that it's really, really important to have either yourself having a lot of experience as a beekeeper or connecting with somebody who is either a master beekeeper or has multiple years of experience keeping bees and keeping bees alive through the winter and having success with that. And that's going to be really important to have a successful program, but also having skills in facilitation, having skills in mindfulness practices are all things that are important for a successful program. And then a quick review of the benefits and the outcomes. Veterans have experienced decreases in anxiety and depression scales, increases in overall health scores. They've expressed finding a sense of purpose. They've expressed reduces in social isolation, increases in connections with the community. So all really positive things that we've been finding. So now we're going to jump into our programs. So just a quick recap of where things are at currently in the VA with Hives programs across the country. So as you know, we have a program at the Manchester, New Hampshire VA. Kansas City and Oklahoma City both have programs. Palo Alto has a program. The Clinical Resource Hub in Visit 19 is working with us through our virtual beekeeping classes. And the Greater LA VA started a program last week, and they had 7 veterans who participated in that program, and they had a really excellent time. Even though the weather didn't cooperate, they were actually able to explore some observation hives and get the veterans just out to an apiary, not on site, but at a local farm, which was great. And then over the next couple of years, we're going to be expanding to Northern California, VA, Cleveland, Coatesville, Arkansas, Saginaw, and then there's a number of other sites that are also working on getting started and developed. And so many of these programs have been working with community partners, well, pretty much all of them. For myself at the Manchester VA, I have a expert beekeeping volunteer who comes and helps with keeping the bees, who I work with. Kansas City and Oklahoma City have partnered with local beekeepers to go out, as well as Palo Alto, to go out to facilities. The Northern California VA they are working on getting the bees on site, but in the meantime, they might be working with one of the local bee clubs or local organizations to get the bees somewhere else while they're working to get them on site. So really getting those connections, getting that beekeeping expertise, and if you can't get bees on site, having access to bees off site is how you're going to have a really thriving program. So there's 4 parts to the program, right? The first one is quality beekeeping education. So again, you need somebody who knows how to keep bees and can help with that education part. And then there's the therapeutic beekeeping practices. So those mind and body practices, those deep breathing exercises, the mindful meditation at the hives, and then accessible hands-on beekeeping experience. We want this to be accessible to everyone, whether they have a physical disability, a mental health disability, really so that it can be accessed by any veteran that wants to participate. And then as well as assessment and evaluation. This is not an evidence-based practice yet. We have some initial data, but we're working on showing that this is an evidence-based practice and to be able to be like, these are the outcomes and be able to share that. So today we are going to really focus on how to bring in that quality beekeeping education and how to make this accessible to veterans with mental health diagnoses. So I'm going to put a poll in the chat let me find it, about what you think some of the barriers are for veterans who are struggling to, or what some of the barriers might be for veterans who will participate in this program. And I just lost my polls. Oh, here we go. Okay. Give me just a second. I had it up and then I switched over to the chat. All right. Can everybody see that? No.
Yes, we can see.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. So what do you anticipate to be barriers for veterans participating in the Hives program? Is it maybe physical disabilities, pain, trouble moving, beekeeping equipment, mental health, anxiety around groups of people, concerns about being near bees? I probably should have put fear of bees on there. Cognitive abilities, being able to remember things, remember facts and information, having the resources for it, having connections in the community for support, distance, or something else. So it looks like we have a lot of people who are like having the distance from the program being a challenge, connections in the community for support, physical disabilities, and resources. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Though, like mental health, cognitive disabilities, we can adjust for those things. Fear of bees, I see, equipment, PTSD, fear of being a part of a group, 100%. Yeah. There's lots of barriers, right? And we want to overcome as many of these barriers as we can. So when we're thinking about mental health and cognitive barriers, we can think about, right, like as a facilitator, what can I do to address some of these barriers? So if we start thinking about mental health first, and then we're going to go into cognitive health and working with people with brain injuries, and then social isolation in the community. We're going to save physical disabilities because that is a topic we're going to cover even more in depth in our webinar on April 16th. It's the 16th, not the 6th. I apologize. That was a typo. So on the 16th. Yeah, several of these definitely can be barriers. And so we're going to talk about how to overcome them. So, Adam, do you want to kind of start with this and I can jump in?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, so when we're dealing with veterans working in these types of programs, mental health is always going to be on top of mind. The program that I run, the Heroes to Hives program, we train about anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000 students a year that are all veterans and military families, including active duty personnel as well. And the thing that we've learned over the last 10 years of running our program is that making sure that you are prepared for this as a facilitator in these types of settings is really important. I've had a couple situations over the years where individuals have had episodes related to PTS or a traumatic brain injury, being in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar faces, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with. Oftentimes can be a very big, thing to overcome for some of these folks. And one of the things I'll say as a facilitator and things that you want to have as like program from a programmatic standpoint as considerations is making sure that you're having dialogues with your students and making sure that they know that you're there to support them. One of the strategies that we use in the Heroes to Hives program is that when we do have on-ground events, we like to have a person identified as a support unit. So you as a facilitator are going to be teaching a class, and the last thing you want to do is if something happens during that class, a mental health crisis, that you all of a sudden have to drop everything and all the attention is drawn to that one individual in that group that is dealing with something. So having the support to be able to help you in that situation where they can take that person aside and support them in the way that they need without drawing full attention to them is just one example of things that you can do to kind of help with these mental health issues before they ever start, by setting yourself up for success, by having a team together that's there to support one another, and making sure that the environment is always a supportive environment. So those are things that you need to make sure that you're thinking about when you're dealing with veterans with histories of anxiety, depression, PTS, or traumatic brain injuries, or histories of trauma overall in general.
So when I facilitate at the VA, I have myself and usually it's another staff or my beekeeping expert volunteer. And depending on who's out there, we identify one of us who is going to be responsible for the safety of the bees, and one of us who is responsible for the safety of the veterans. So one of us is focused on the beehives and what is going on with the bees in the beehives, and the other person is focused on the veterans and what is going on with them, right? Do we need to encourage someone to take a step away? Do we need to encourage someone to get more involved or find out why they're staying back? And then the other person is, are the bees starting to get agitated? Do we need a little more smoke? Do we need to close this hive up and move to another one? Is there robbing going on? So that you can focus your attention on what is going to really be beneficial for the whole group. Another thing that I have been really aware of as a rec therapist is knowing that as we're putting veterans into bee suits, we need to recognize that we are putting something over their head, over their face as a veil, and that for some of these veterans, that can be triggering for them. There can be a lot of things that are triggering for them, but putting something over someone's head can be very triggering for them. So I like to walk them through at the very beginning how to put on the bee suit, where all of the zippers are, and how to get out, so that they know how to get out of the suit as well. So I'm not going to just walk up behind someone and zip up their hood or put it over their head. I'm going to come up to them, usually on the side of them or in front of them, and say, hey, can I help you get that hood on? And I will tell them, reach behind you, pull that hood, because it's usually hanging behind them, pull it up over your head, and then I'll say, you have 2 hooks in the back, grab those, and you're going to pull the zipper around in front. And then if they can't find it or they can't reach it, I'll help them with their hand to find it. Or if they can't reach it, I'll say, okay, let me help you get it a little closer. So they know where the closure is, so that if they are feeling overwhelmed or triggered, that they can quickly remove that and get out of the space if they need to. And letting them know that and walking them through it is something that I've done in a lot of sports. I do the same thing when I put hockey equipment on someone. Like, this is how you get in it, and this is how you get out of it. We can get you out of it just as quicker than we got you in it if we need to. And just let us know where you're at. Another thing when it comes to mental health is thinking about the setup of your apiary or the apiary that you're going to. A lot of times beehives are really close to each other. Sometimes there's 2 stacked next to each other. Sometimes there's one and then a foot away is another one. So if you have 2 small groups of people, one working at one beehive, one working at the other beehive, you're going to have them very close together. And I've worked with some veterans I've worked with have felt that space wasn't quite enough, or that it was overwhelming for them. So being able to have at least 10 feet between your beehives allows for small groups at each of those hives. So a group of 4 and a group of 4 or a group of 5 is probably about the max I would do at either hive. And having them so that when they're standing with their back to another group of people, that they are not running into each other and they're not feeling like they're too close that somebody could come up behind them. And that can help with alleviating any or some anxieties. But then there are things we're not going to know about. Our beehives at the VA have a road in front of them and a road on the side. And we were having construction projects over the last couple of years. There was one day where there was a construction truck parked running with its diesel engine going. And one of the veterans looked at me and said, can you please go ask them to move? That is really triggering me right now. And I was like, what's triggering you? She's like, the truck. I was like, okay, I'm on it. But before I got to them, they moved on. But knowing that we're going to have things that we are not going to recognize as a trigger beforehand and being like, all right, just going with whatever comes up, but being able to set that expectation that this is a safe space and this is a place that we want to make comfortable for you. And if something is feeling uncomfortable, let us know so that we can address it, is really what's going to make it the most therapeutic experience for the veterans.
I would totally agree with that, Val. And one other thing I would add to that is that oftentimes, we think about getting everything in place and making sure we have this really safe and secure educational environment. And something like Val brought up with the truck comes up. The other thing I would bring up as well is that these individuals are already in a heightened sense of alertness because they're working with a venomous insect, and many of them have never been around this type of thing before. So not only is it the potential threat of getting stung that has people heightened, and oftentimes when they're getting into one of these programs, another thing that can oftentimes heighten the kind of excitement of what's going on in the apiary is the bees themselves. And so, like Val said, having that expert beekeeper there to be able to tell you, yeah, these bees are getting a little too testy. They're going to get real hot here very quickly, and we're all going to be in a different situation. That is something that these veterans will feel. The energy that comes off of these hives is tremendous. You're talking about, in a full-size hive, 40 to 60,000 individuals that are working together. And when they get keyed up, you can feel it personally. You can feel that physical sensation coming from those hives. So those are very important things to keep in mind as well.
Is there anything else that anyone can think of when it comes in terms of mental health? Either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and feel free to just shout it out that you could think of that we haven't really brought up, because I know there are lots of things we could talk about. But just knowing that you want to be aware of who you're working with. And if you know what their triggers are, being able to address them. And if not, just having a good sense of generally what might be a trigger, and what might make somebody more anxious and less anxious, and being calm when you get there. It's really easy to get really excited, but that can actually make some people more anxious. So just, you don't have to be flat, but just being calm and moving slow and saying, all right, these are our goals, these are our expectations, this is what we're going to do, and lay it out. Yeah, Angela says a bee suit is similar to a bomb suit, could absolutely be a trigger. 100%. Yeah. And having different types of bee suits and different types of veils available is not only important for physical health, which we'll talk about next week, but also for mental health. Absolutely. There's different styles that will work better for certain people. Definitely. All right, so we're going to move on to just talking a little bit about brain injuries and cognitive impairment. We work with a lot of individuals who have brain injuries, either from sports accidents, time in the military, automobile accidents, anything that could have concussions, and it could be something from their time in the military, or it could just be something from their life. But that can really impact how they can remember, how they can process what we are teaching. And there's a number of different ways to address this and to kind of work with veterans. I have found that many of the individuals I work with have gone through our B school multiple times because the repetition is really important. It helps them process, give them a chance to ask questions that they didn't think of the first time because they were processing, um, and allows them to really digest that information. So having visuals, having handouts, something I haven't done yet, but that I'm going to be doing is going to be painting on the beehive boxes information that is valuable when you're in the beehive. So it's a reference, it's a visual reference right there while you're out at the hive. You don't have to be fumbling with papers, it's right on the side of the hive. Um, so that's one way to deal with it. And then meet people where they're at. We don't necessarily, not everyone is going to have their own beehives. Some people just want to come and learn about bees, and that is totally fine. If they just want to come and hang out with our bees, that's awesome. Like, the more hands to help take care of them, the better. I also have a number of veterans who are older who are starting to have some mild cognitive impairment, so some early dementia. And those individuals are just curious and are like, I'm having trouble getting around. But I can attend bee school, and this is something I've always wanted to learn about. I'm not going to keep bees, but it's something that's cognitively stimulating for me, which is great. Like, come on, come and learn stuff with us, ask questions, be part of this community. And you can be a part of that community no matter what way you think that that's going to work for you.
Yeah, the brain injury thing is something that's really important to understand. I'm an individual who has a brain injury myself, and when the brain injury happened, I felt like I had a whole new understanding of the students that I'd been working with that had been dealing with this. And the repetition is a really big thing. I used to work for Michigan State University and had a colleague who I taught beekeeping with, who had a lot of issues with veterans not remembering things. That we would basically give them instruction, expect them to learn it, and then go out to the beehives, and they would not be able to regurgitate that knowledge or be able to demonstrate that knowledge, almost like they hadn't learned it at all. And there was a lot of frustration on the part of that individual in teaching these people because of the constant need for repetition. But as a facilitator, like Val said, you have to meet these people where they are. And it is really important. Working with veterans as a demographic, we have about 15% of the Heroes to Hive students have traumatic brain injuries. And so we know this is a really important thing. And so we constantly give them access to the learning materials that we've given them so that they can constantly review them. Handouts are a really big thing. And like Val said, being able to put, whether it's painting something on the side of your beehives, like life cycles that are hard to remember, like how many days does it take for a honeybee to go from egg to adult in all three casts, the worker, the drone, and the queen, which are all different days, and they all go through different phases on different time schedules. something as simple as that and putting that somewhere where they can reference it immediately and don't have to dedicate that to memory is something that's really important. One of the things that we're looking to do here in the future with Heroes to Hives and our teaching apiaries is actually having full signs that are in the apiary with you, that you can actually, have life cycles on them, have varroa mite life cycles, different treatment options, and reference materials that are right there so that they can turn around and look at those things and then be able to engage in the conversation. Because one of the things that when you're dealing with TBI, a lot of times when you're dealing with these things where you're not remembering, that is where the isolation really starts to come in. You start to remove yourself from these groups because you feel like, I should be able to remember this. And I know from my own personal experience, there's a lot of frustration that goes along with not being able to remember things that you should be able to remember. And so being able to meet these individuals where there are, in these types of situations is really important. And it's not a lot of heavy lifting, but one of the things I would say that you as clinicians may experience, especially working with an experienced beekeeper or a beekeeping educator, is frustration with this because their expectation is completely different because they're not used to working with this demographic. And that's where your expertise as a VA clinical staff or someone that's working with veterans in a health setting, that's where your expertise comes in to let those people know, hey, this is what may happen while we're in this instruction. As you're going through this with these individuals, you may need to repeat things that we've already talked about 10 times before because this is the demographic that you're working with. And that's what makes this kind of work really special, is because we're able to kind of meet these individuals where they are and give them this experience with bees that, and otherwise they may feel alienated in other groups because of a condition like a TBI.
One other thing I just want to bring up about this is that there's lots of different education opportunities, right? So we have bee school on VVC on Tuesdays at the VA. Adam's program, Heroes to Hives, is a 9-month self-paced beekeeping education program, which is excellent, but it's not for everybody, right? And I've had a number of people who have like, oh, I started it, I couldn't do it. Not a number, a few. But there are ways to get them there because that information is really important, really valuable. But if we start them if someone is having trouble with that curriculum, starting them with B school on VVC to get that repetition, get that vocabulary down, so it's easier to understand the information from Heroes to Hives, then that can help them to be more successful and not get frustrated in that. So knowing kind of like the different levels of education available, knowing like Heroes to Hives is self-paced. You have to have that motivation and you have to have that determination to go in every month, watch the videos, do your reading, as opposed to the VA Hives B school where you get an appointment every week. It comes into your email. It says you're coming to B school today. Log into your VA Video Connect. And so there's different stepping stones so we can meet people where they're at as well as where they're at in their education levels and where they're at in their cognitive levels. And maybe it means somebody stays in B school for a while, or maybe it means they go one class and they're like, I'm good. I'm going to go take Heroes to Hives, or I'm going to go hands-on program. Like there's lots of different ways for each participant to really thrive in these programs. Nothing against your program, Adam. I love it.
No, we all know that. I mean, it is, and Val and I have talked about this over the years of working together, is that we kind of see like the Hives program as like a stepping stone. So, you're in a VA setting, you're interested in honeybees, maybe you're dealing with a cognitive, impairment, and it is, we're very honest in our course that it is a big undertaking. I teach our course like a college level beekeeping course, and it is heavy on science, but that's not for everybody. But, that's where the Hives program comes in, is the ability to kind of train yourself up to that. And I think once we start talking about partnerships, I'll come back to this because we kind of have almost like an educational pipeline that we've talked about over the years with some of the partners that we have that we work with as well.
Yeah. So the last thing I just want to touch on before we really go into the partnerships is that social isolation. We have a lot of veterans who are rural veterans. We have a lot of veterans who have trouble getting to the VA. And social isolation is a real thing, and it's a real challenge, and it really affects people's mental health. So there's a lot of ways that we can help veterans to get into beekeeping, learn how to use beekeeping as a therapeutic tool, and how to really engage in it. And some of that's through these virtual opportunities, virtual classes. Other ways are getting them connected with their local bee clubs. Every state, I believe, has a state beekeeping club. And then within those states, there are local clubs, and we'll talk about those a little bit more. But even in very small New Hampshire, there's 6 local bee clubs in regions of little New Hampshire. So there's ways to get connected with people in the really local community. And then working with the apiaries in your catchment area. And we're also working on some virtual reality possibilities. And while we're talking about it, I have a veteran who I've been working with. He lives in upstate New York. He was referred to me through an interfacility consult because he heard about the program. He's like, I want to learn how to be a beekeeper. I was like, great. So we got a referral for him from his facility to the virtual classes. And he took 2 rounds of bee school. And then at the end, he was like, hey, I think I've got this. He's like, I got connected with my local bee club. He's like, I'm a hermit. I don't talk to people. And like, honestly, when I first met with him, he had like no social network, nothing. It was him and his dogs. And he was afraid of the local community. He had some health issues that really were making it hard for him to connect with people and making him fearful of connecting with people. Um, but he, after 2 rounds of B school and building that community and that trust in that community and encouraging him to connect with his local bee club and him connecting with a beekeeper down the road from him, he was like, I'm good. I've got this. I have a mentor. I have been to her house twice to be part of her bee hives. I'm to a bee club. I was like, what? You're going to a beekeeping meeting? Are you awesome? Um, and so it really just opened up his world. He drove over to New Hampshire for a pollinator workshop that we had. Like it just really expanded his social connections and just really opened his mind to what things could be, and that there were people in the community who had a similar mindset to him and wanted him to be successful in beekeeping and were going to help him in that. So it was really just such a great awareness of like, hey, we can do this even at a distance for somebody who lives literally in the middle of nowhere, off grid in a cabin. Like he is off grid. He's spectacular, but very like, but there's a club where he lives.
Yeah, the club networks, and I would say I've been a beekeeper for almost 20 years, and the beekeeping community is one of the most supportive communities I've ever been part of. I've worked in agriculture for over 30 years, and I've worked in a lot of different cropping systems in a lot of different places all around the United States. And I will always say that the beekeeping community as an agricultural community is the most inviting and most accepting community that you will interact with. And we've had the same experience with so many veterans that experience social isolation that have, just, you get out of the military and it's like falling off of a cliff. You lose this family that you've been part of for so long. And, oftentimes many of your battle buddies don't come home. And so there's always this huge sense of loss when you leave the military. And that's what creates that kind of social isolation. And I'll even say for myself personally, when I got out of the military, it was the same thing. I got out because of an injury. I was seeing the VA and going for treatment for my injuries. And it wasn't until I really found beekeeping that I found this kind of network and community that I felt like I could be part of. Another thing with social isolation is oftentimes how we talk about beekeeping with veterans. So one of the things that we use when we talk to veterans about being interested in beekeeping and why beekeeping is something that's really fascinating is this idea of continued national service. So not all of us, when we leave the military, are done serving our country. Many of us that get out on med boards and things like that, that it was the military's decision that we were getting out. And so, in those types of situations, you have a lot of people who still want to serve their country. And beekeeping is a form of national service. The pollination that we provide as beekeepers, they contribute to a third of the food that we eat as humans, and are absolutely imperative to most specialty crops that we grow in the United States is honeybee pollination. And so communicating that to somebody that they're being part of they're continuing their national service by protecting the most important managed pollinator on the planet, that oftentimes can speak to people and get them out of that shell. The other thing I would say with a beekeeper is that When we leave the military, I was in the Army and, identified as a soldier. I was a soldier, and that was what I was. And that's an identity that you hold on to as an individual, that you know and you feel. And that's something that you can do with beekeeping as well. A beekeeper, that's an identity that people take on, and people talk about their beekeeping endeavors and with a lot of pride and a lot of, joy in what they're able to share. And the thing about bees is when somebody finds out you're a beekeeper, they want to talk to you about bees, whether if they're a beekeeper or not. People are just naturally fascinated by bees. And by giving veterans education in honeybees, it's also a form of empowerment, because now they've got the knowledge that people want to know. And so when they're in a setting and somebody learns that they're a beekeeper, all of a sudden there's all these questions, and they're the one that has the answers. And that's something that's very powerful for a person that maybe has felt lost and not felt like they had anything to contribute anymore. They've done their time in the military and now they're just kind of pulling back and holding themselves close. This is a way to open those individuals up in very meaningful ways and get them engaged in a community that is just a very accepting community.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And everyone in the beekeeping community wants other beekeepers to do well, because if the beekeepers in your community are doing well, then their beehives are going to do well and not negatively impact yours. And so it's partially like, I want you to do well, but it's also like we want our bees to do well. People are in beekeeping for a reason, and often it's because they want to support the environment. And by helping you support the environment helps them. I just posted a poll about just what are you aware of for resources in your community? Are you aware of local bee clubs? Are you aware of that many universities have cooperative extensions? So as we're going to start talking about some of these resources and how do we create these partnerships with them? Do you want to start this one or do you want me to?
I'm happy to start this one, Val.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
finding the right beekeepers in beekeeping education really is something, you as an individual, as a clinician, may not be experienced in honeybees. And most people aren't, right? I mean, it's kind of an out there activity when you think about it. And there's not a lot of us that keep bees in the United States. But for the right person, this is something that can be very meaningful. And so when you're thinking about getting out there and starting to create partnerships to offer beekeeping programming, meaning you're going to be, connecting with an expert, one of the easiest ways to do that, especially if you're working at a VA facility, is to start at the state level. Every state in the United States has a state level beekeeping organization, and some of them are very robust and offer education programs, master beekeeping programs, all of these types of things, conferences. Most of them are doing all of this. And so you have the educators, the experts in the state are typically going to be part of the state beekeeping organization. And when they find out that you're working with veterans and they're trying to get them involved in beekeeping, just from my own personal experience, there is going to be a lot of folks that are going to raise their hand that want to help you with that. And many of those folks that are in those leadership positions oftentimes are veterans or are part of a military family. And so they already have an inherent connection to the community that we're working with. The club level is also a great place to work. And that's, if you're in an area, especially in rural areas, most of the time there are beekeeping clubs around. I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we have 2 beekeeping clubs in the UP serving, basically a very small 3% of the population of Michigan. And so even though I'm in a very rural area, there are clubs that are nearby that host conferences, that host educational workshops. Some of them even have educational apiaries. And that's one of the really big things, is not all of you at VA facilities are going to have an administrator or a facility that can accommodate honeybees, right? I mean, that's just the reality of the situation when we're dealing with healthcare. And so having a connection to a local club that has a teaching apiary, that is a great way to get involved with that. We've been working with the Saginaw VA here in Michigan, and one of the things they were dealing with was that the facility just couldn't house honeybees. It wasn't possible. And so we were able to connect them with a retired state apiarist here in Michigan, who is also an Air Force veteran, to be able to help them use his facility to actually provide education. So that's a really, really good place to start. The big thing you're always going to want to be focused on is the experience level. There are a lot of people who are hobby beekeepers that are very passionate about what they do, but don't have the educational background to teach people to be successful beekeepers. And that's really important. setting people up for success in beekeeping. If someone's really interested in getting into honeybees, you want to set them up for success by having them have people who are really experienced and successful at keeping bees. One of the things I say in our education programs is that we do not need more beekeepers in the United States. We have plenty of beekeepers. We need more educated beekeepers. And so by getting into this, there's two kind of avenues that we're talking about here. The therapeutic aspect, which, some of your people you're working with are there for the experience, there for the therapy part of it. But you are going to have a subset of this population that just gets really interested in bees. And so making sure that you're working with someone that has a lot of experience is going to be able to support both of those demographics, the individuals that are looking for just the experience, and then those individuals that are looking for much more in the way of beekeeping education. The other thing that is really important is established curriculum. There are a few beekeeping education programs in the United States that really focus on military service members. And so let's talk about that educational pipeline that I had kind of mentioned before. So Val and the VA have the Hives program that basically is kind of like the starting point we see for a lot of individuals, where they're getting some experience, they're getting the therapeutic aspects of it, they're in a safe and secure educational space, and it's something that pretty much anybody can participate in, and it's designed to be that way. It's designed to be accessible to everybody, and there's no expectation you're going to become a beekeeper, right? It's just the experience. For those individuals that we identified that say, like Val had mentioned, the gentleman in New York, this individual got really excited about bees and he's just ready to go now. He's got a couple of sessions in and he's like, what's the next step? So what we've kind of talked about is this idea of, jumping into Heroes to Hives is a really big task because it's just such a big program. But there are other programs that we work with that kind of are another stepping stone. So like if they go from the Hives program, we would then kind of recommend them to maybe check out the Mission Believe program, which is based out of Maryland, which is a 7-week science-based beekeeping course that's online that you have to show up once a week. So it still has that structure and that accountability like you had in the Hives program. You're not just on your own like with Heroes to Hives and doing a self-paced program. But that kind of gives them that sample of what it's like to be in the classroom again, right? To learning science-based education again. And so that gives them kind of an idea of, okay, this is something that I like. They can stop right after Mission Believe and continue to work to get hands-on training and things like that, and still have a foundation of experience in biology and basic management. But then if they decide, hey, what's the next step? They can move on to Heroes to Hives and do that full 9-month program that's totally self-paced. We have a lot of individuals that don't even want to stop there. They get done with our program and they're like, Dr. Adam, what's the next step? And so we actually have a partnership with another organization based out of the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, called the Great Plains Master Beekeeping Course. So they finished the Heroes to Hives course, and now they're able to transfer our credits into the GPMB course and continue their education through a Master Beekeeping certificate, which is basically like in our industry, it's kind of like a bachelor's degree in beekeeping. It's what we use in our industry as kind of a marker of an expert, is a Master Beekeeping certificate. So those are things that you can do as you identify these individuals that are, want more from this type of a program, that you can actually lead them down that path of individual organizations that have established curriculum, that are based in science, that are going to set them up for success when it comes to coming into the industry.
And our B school is also, it is based in science, but we are going at the basic science. We are doing like it's all science based, but it is like taking it in at the ground level, we don't know much about bees or science, and we're gonna just keep it at that not overwhelming level, because it can get overwhelming. However, we do every couple months have an open question and answer session, like with no specific topic. And yesterday we were talking about haploid diploid genetics of drones and queens, and if a drone can meet with a queen who is the cousin son of the mother queen of the swarm hive. Like we went into but we talked about, like, so I was able to go in and describe all the genetics, because somebody was like, this is what I wake up and think about at 2 a.m. And I'm like, okay, well, don't worry too much about it, because this is why. We were able to discuss it. But that's not how in depth we go regularly. But for those people that have that curiosity, are able to answer those questions or provide additional resources for them. And then also those next steps, which is awesome that we have these community partners already set up for this graduated education to build those. And then we also are developing these great facilitation skills. Like that's what this class is part of. Like, how can we include those therapeutic processes? I had somebody yesterday in our class who was like, hey, all of you beekeepers, why do you keep bees? And the biggest answer, all of the answers were because they are peaceful, because I find a peace that is beyond understanding, because it calms me down. I go out and have coffee with my bees every morning. And I mean, I think that somebody might have said because it helps the environment or because they want to pollinate, but all like everybody had, it was more about that it's a calming hobby for me. So being able to encourage that as well. So maybe you're a beekeeper and you're like, I got this, but I don't know how to facilitate, and finding those right connections is also, we're not going to get too much into that, but because that's part of this training. So, but that is like, okay, where are my skills and where do I need help and how do we establish those? So there are partnerships out there and there are people who want to help. Like our New Hampshire Beekeepers Association is amazing. So New Hampshire Beekeepers Association allows any person in a beekeeping education program a free New Hampshire Beekeeping Association membership. And membership is really cheap. It's like $15 a year. It is not expensive to join a bee club. But that supports like really great speakers who come from across the country for these conferences and these meetings that we have. So all of the so because we have a beekeeping education program, all of the veterans in our program have a free membership to the New Hampshire Beekeeping Association and can join their quarterly club meetings where they bring in really awesome speakers. There was just somebody from Maryland who came up and talked about genetics, and it was spectacular speaker. So there's really great opportunities out there. A veteran in my local bee club just started a beekeepers relief fund because he had experienced a fire and he wanted to be able to help other beekeepers. So he started a nonprofit and he is raising money, and he has sent beehives down to North Carolina when they had the hurricanes that hit. A lot of the beekeepers he knew had lost hives. The same out in California. With the wildfires, he sent some hives out that way as well to support the beekeepers in the greater community. So it's an amazing helping community of people that want to be part of that, who want to support each other. And anytime I've asked for help, even if I haven't asked for help, I've had people be like, "Hey, if you need help at the VA, let me know." It's over an hour for some of these people to drive, but they're like, "Oh, I can come down that way. My daughter goes to school near there. I'll just come by." I'm like, "All right, I'll let you know." So people just want to be helpful, but just make sure, like Adam said, that you know that they are knowledgeable. So you also need to ask those questions to make sure that they are people who are not going to be sharing less than ideal information. So not everyone has the most scientific practices. So we talked about these community connections. And so honestly, you can just reach out. You can Google the bee clubs in your area. I see that many of you are really familiar, like some of you are familiar with like state bee clubs and the cooperative extensions, farms and apiaries. Most people are aware of gardening clubs. There's usually at least one or two beekeepers in master gardening clubs. So if you reach out to a if you're like, I can't find anyone but master gardeners, I put that on there so you can know. You can reach out to them and say, I'm looking for a master beekeeper. That is a certification that signifies that somebody has a certain level of knowledge and expertise, and you can expect that they are going to have that science-based beekeeping. But they're always willing to help. And if someone isn't able to help like continuously, at least they might come and talk and be a guest speaker, or be part of like, hey, I'll come to a special event, or let me come by, or come over, let me bring a observation hive to your facility. Like there's a lot of different ways to engage. But usually just asking, hey, is there anyone that's interested? You're going to get yes as an answer. And if you have trouble, let me know, and we have a pretty big network of beekeepers around the country. When you're establishing this connection and this collaboration and this partnership, you want to make sure that you're really clear about the goals and the purpose of what you're doing, right? We talked a lot about how veterans might not learn or retain that information as quickly, or might be overwhelmed, and we can't just like throw bee suits on people, or we can't just come up behind somebody and put our hand on their back and say, hey, look at this. So just being really clear with the expectations and the goals of what you're doing in this program and what you're looking for in a partnership, so that the expectation is clear of these volunteers to participate with you or to partner with you. And you want to make sure they're following best practices for beekeeping, that they are doing mite checks, that they are treating for mites, that they are treating for mites with FDA approved mite treatments. Those are all things that are really important and science-based. And there are people out there who are not, and that is their beekeeping practice, but we want to be focusing on teaching quality beekeeping through science and evidence-based practices. And we don't want to have somebody arguing with us when we're at the apiary or questioning what we're doing, who is our co-facilitator. If a veteran in the program is questioning, totally fine, but you don't want to be having that battle with your co-facilitator right there. It's just uncomfortable and weird. And I've definitely had one volunteer that I was like, yeah, we're done. So we had to let that one go. Then if you are having them come to the VA, you want to have them registered and badged as a volunteer. You might want to send up an MOU or MOA with a local apiary, with a local bee club, to be able to use their facility, to use their site. You might not need to establish that right away. You might be able to go there for some site visits to try some things out before developing a formal agreement, but it's something you might want to explore at your facility depending on the level of expectation and agreement and what your facility expects. We have ours on site, so we don't have any MOUs or MOAs, but there are some facilities that have those set up, some that are working on some now. So you want to just make sure that that's a way to lay out those expectations and have it clear who's going to be doing what, who's going to be responsible for what, because bees don't do things on our timelines. So sometimes they need care outside of when we're there. So we want to make sure who's taking care of bees when, and who's responsible for what. And recognizing that not every organization or volunteer is right for the program, and that's okay. So we want to just make sure we're clear on that. Anything you want to add, Adam?
No, I think you covered it all right there. That was great.
Okay. So that is what we have for this program. So before we open up for questions, I do want to share that we have one more webinar on April 16th. It's about accessibility. So we're going to talk about different hive styles, accessibility at the apiary, and so for physical disabilities. We had planned two-day trainings for Be Calm, Be Well. They were going to be one in Michigan and one in New Hampshire. However, we are hearing rumbling that in-person trainings are going to be limited. So we are revamping that, and we're going to be doing a different curriculum. We'll share that in the future. We are probably this year going to do a virtual level 1 like facilitator training, and then next year plan to have some hands-on facilitation training. So I apologize because that is not what we had hoped to be doing, but with everything how it is, we kind of just gotta go with the flow and go with where things are at. So the registration for April 16th will be out soon. I believe it has gone through the approval process, so it should be available in the next soon, in a really near future. But you never know how things are going to go. So yeah, I do have, okay, we're going to open it up for questions, and I'm going to put one more poll in the chat, just about how confident you are feeling in your ability to find a partner in the community. and your confidence in ability to facilitate mind and body practices. But if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask us a question, any questions you have.
Val, I do see in the chat there's a question regarding, doesn't this buzzing sound of bees have a calming effect? And in fact, it does. Bees buzz in the key of C, which is a very calming key for individuals. And actually, in the United States, we're kind of way behind the times when it comes to bees as a modality for therapeutic intervention. I actually had the joy of going to Slovenia last year, where bees are a very kind of important and integral part of the broader healthcare system, and individuals go to bee houses. The bees are housed in houses in Slovenia using a different hive style than we use here in the United States, called an Aja hive. And individuals go to these bee houses to actually have sound therapy, respiratory therapy, because the breathing the propolis and the actual odors from beehives actually helps with respiratory illnesses and things like that. So people will go in for respiratory therapy, for sound therapy, in addition to all sorts of other therapies, honey massages and things like that. So there are other places around the world where bees are actually kind of integrated into the healthcare setting. Like I said, in the United States, we're a little behind the times on that. Venom therapy is another thing that is used very widely for things like arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and all sorts of other ailments as well. So yeah, absolutely, that's something that it does happen.
Yeah, 100%. And people will give you, I mean, even the veterans will tell us like that buzzing is calming to them. Devonda, I'm so glad that you were able to find that there's a bee association right down the street at the next red light from the VA, right? They're out there and they're easy to find and connect with. Donna, yes, you can send their information to me and I can talk to them and help. Absolutely. If you are unsure if this is a good person or a good group to talk to, I'll help you. Help you talk to them. Help you vet them, and we'll go through it. We'll figure out if they're a good fit. I'll help you out with that for sure. Or if there's somebody who wants to help with teaching, if they have a topic that they're really passionate about and they want to help teach with one of the virtual classes, they are more than welcome there as well. Awesome. Angela, I'm excited for your program to start as well. All right, well, yeah, use your veterans who are resources as well, right? As the veterans have gone through the classes, I put them in leadership positions. The ones who are like, I got this. I'd be like, okay, you're in charge of that hive with these 3 veterans. Do your hive inspection, 100%.
Yeah, we do the same thing in Heroes to Hives. I have many of students that have gone through our program and gotten a master beekeeping certificate and now are trainers for us and actually run teaching apiaries for the Heroes to Hives program. So that's a great way to keep your veterans going and give them a newfound purpose.
Yeah, and Libby, your confidence will grow as you continue to be a beekeeper more. I know you're in your first couple years, so having those mentors around you are absolutely important, and really finding someone you connect with as a mentor, 100%. But you got this. And connect with C. Hastings there. All right, well, it is 3 o'clock. We're gonna wrap up. I'll stay on for another minute or two if anybody has any additional questions, or feel free to reach out with anything. We have some contact information right up here, and really great to see everybody. Thank you all for being here, and hopefully we'll see you all again in April for our final webinar. Donna, I'm gonna grab that contact info right there.